What's up, y'all? I'm KC.
And I'm Tyler, and this is another Big Buck Breakdown from the Element Podcast.
Brought to you by Exodus Trail Cameras.
All right, so now on the phone we've got Zach Ferenbaugh from the Hunting Public. Dude, you sound tired.
I'm finally catching up. I was up for about 24 hours the night that I got the buck in Pennsylvania, so I was behind for a little bit there, but finally starting to catch up and just getting work done so I can get back out there.
Yeah, yep. That we just talked to one of your counterparts, Aaron Warburton, and he's kind of in the same boat. He's like, I'm just working, just trying to get back out there. So it's like, it's a
constant battle.
Yeah, it's a constant battle. But that's life for most guys. They're working so they can go take some time and go hunting this time of year and getting into the rut and that kind of thing. And so, but you recently had some success on a pretty cool buck in a pretty cool state, man. Like, you don't see a ton of bucks that size coming from PA, and I know the people that are killing them are being pretty hush about it because they do exist there. But tell us a little bit about what happened, man.
Well, it was a rare situation where really the first place that I walked into when I got to Pennsylvania, I'd kind of been doing some road scouting with Greg and on that first day and just kind of checking out the area, getting a feel for things. And we finally decided to walk into a spot right out of the gate. We were seeing a good sign and kind of backtrack the sign to the spot where I'd originally pinned, 10 or so days before the hunt, just, map scouting from home, and got back onto the ridge where we were hoping to find deer. And it was probably about an 800-yard long ridge from where it ran into private and got into like kind of a fescue field up on top, all the way to where it played out at the bottom is about 800 yards. On one side of the ridge, there was just a select cut with some, tall vegetation growing up, but also, kind of that, young growth, regrowth coming back from the cut. But there was also some mature oaks in there that were dropping a ton of acorns, mostly red oak. And then the other side of the ridge, split right down the middle, hadn't been cut. So, we kind of just scouted our way back in there and saw a really, really good buck sign right out of the gate, first spot we were in. So, it was like, man, I feel like as big of a ridge as this is, we can just keep hunting it until, basically the sign dries up or we get one. And I don't do that very often, but I would say once every year, every couple of years, there's a spot that just makes sense to me and I just can't let it go. It's happened, probably 3 or 4 times in my life where I've just found a spot that I, no matter what, I'm like, I just know it's going to play out here. Mm-hmm. A lot of times I do a lot of bouncing around. I talk about that often, in my, my strategy often is to bounce and cover a bunch of ground. But here it just looked good. And compared to what everybody else was seeing, it was the Public Land Challenge, so we had multiple groups out hunting, and compared to what everybody's seeing, it just continued to confirm that I should just keep hunting here. So ultimately, we weren't really seeing much as far as actually seeing deer just because of hunting off the ground. A lot of times you can't see very far in general, but just the nature of that forest being select cut, and then even the uncut stuff was still pretty thick. Visibility was low. We weren't seeing many deer, but we were just seeing tons and tons of fresh buck sign. I mean, every time we go in there, it's like there's something new. There's some new clue, whether it be a fresh rub or a fresh scrape or just big buck tracks in general that were smoking fresh. We were seeing all this sign right after rainy days for the first several days. So it's like, it's fresh. They're in here. Somehow we're just barely missing them. Just kept, what I would call full court press in this place and just hunting it, is hitting different little pockets every day, just trying something new, never hunting the same exact spot and just continuing to learn about it. And as kind of the week progressed, I was squeezing in on the center of where I really thought these deer were. And we ended up going in, and I guess it was the day before we shot the buck, and Aaron and I were running a little bit late, which kind of helped us in a weird way, where we were kind of walking down a logging road at first light, but that kind of put us in the middle of where these deer were really spending the majority of their daylight time. And at the time, we weren't totally sure where they were, but this confirmed it. We saw a nice buck, and I think it's the one that I ended up shooting. I'm not positive. I never will be, but looked like a pretty good buck, and he was following a doe, and he skirted around us, but he wasn't very far from us, and we never bumped him. We heard him grunting, moving around us, and either him or another buck, but heard grunting around us, so kind of confirmed that they were in this cut. Well, the following morning, Ted and I went back in there and, of course, saw another fresh buck track, really big track that was sinking deep in some really hard kind of gravel almost. He was just so heavy. He was digging in there and feeling really good. It's like, man, we're right behind these things. Like, they got to be close. And ended up hearing a deer kind of go up and around us that morning, but never laid eyes on him. So that evening, we went back in, and honestly, we were looking back on it, we were planning on playing it too safe. We were like, we'll go up to the top and kind of get on the edge of the transition of the cut and the, uncut forest, and we'll sit up on top and we'll kind of wait to get super aggressive till tomorrow, which was Saturday, and it was going to be a temperature drop, like a big cold front. But from that point on, Friday afternoon until basically Sunday, the temperature was going to be just constantly dropping, staying down low in the 50s. So it was kind of the beginning of the front coming in. We had a little bit of wind, and we got up there to where we were hoping to hunt, which was pretty dang far from where, like I said, this is a big 800-yard ridge. It was pretty far from where we had hunted in the morning and heard that deer and saw that big track, which, again, looking back on it, I mean, it was kind of silly to leave that spot in the first place, but we got up to the top and we bumped into, we could see up ahead of us this other hunter. So we just backed off before we got too close to him, and circled all the way back down around to the end of the ridge where we had hunted that morning and got closer to where we thought we heard a deer and saw a fresh track, and ended up essentially just having it all kind of click in that moment where we got up a little bit higher up on the ridge than we had been that morning, and we started finding some big beds on the logging road where there was some tall grass, and saw these big beds, saw a lot of crossing trails. But I started to, like I said, it was clicking that these deer are using these big oak trees and going from oak tree to oak tree, but then they're also using the path of least resistance on this log trail. So right in front of us, there was this big X. There was multiple trails and multiple logging roads that came together right in one spot. And Ted and I just basically plopped down in the logging road using tall grass as our cover. And we were about 20 yards from that intersecting trail. And there's all kinds of good fresh tracks on it. We can hear acorns dropping all around us. And really behind us on the downwind and down the hill where our thermals were pulling, there really weren't that many oaks. So we assumed if deer were moving around, they'd be up in front of us, kind of using that crossing. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, it gets to be and at this point too, because of having to make that adjustment from moving around that other guy, we were running a little late. So this was, I don't know, probably an hour before dark. We got finally settled in, and about a half hour after sitting there, we heard a deer moving, and it sounded like it pretty much just got up or not moved far from, where it was originally bedded. And it moved down from our left and got right above that logging road. Seemed like it was just about to step into our shooting lane. My heart's up. I don't know what it is necessarily, but it sounds like one deer, assuming it's a buck. And heart rate's going up, and feeling like I'm about to draw, I'm about to see this thing. And I thought I even caught a glimpse of a tine, and all of a sudden it stopped, and nothing. Nothing happened. It didn't take a step. I'm not kidding, not a single step. And I couldn't hear it crunching acorns. I couldn't hear it doing anything. But like I said, it's for sure inside of 40 yards. I think it was probably inside of 30 yards. And the whole time in my head, I keep thinking, man, I bet you that's just a buck that just walked and either bedded or is just straight up standing there, looking at the intersection of these trails, just waiting to hear or see another deer to confirm that it's time for him to come out of the cover. Because, I mean, like I said, we're inside a bow range of this thing. We can't see him.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I just got to the point where I was like, man, I don't know that he's going to make a move until he sees something. And we're running low on time. So maybe 10 minutes left. I decided, and Ted and I are sitting beside each other, and it's just so calm that, like, we can't even talk because this thing's right here, and I don't want to blow it by trying to communicate. So, which is rare for me, usually I'm talking like crazy. I've even been noticing some comments of like, I wish Zach would just be quiet and whatever, it's just me. I talk a lot. But I was struggling to not talk to Ted because I was like, I want to, basically I wanted to tell him, like, I think this thing's still here. And I eventually just like breathed the words, I think it's still right there. And he breathed back and said, me too. So I decided to grunt. I grunted a couple times, just nothing major, just, kind of your general grunts, and started scraping the ground. One of the advantages of hunting off the ground is that you can make very realistic calling sounds, versus, if you're in a stand, you don't have as much ability, at least easy ability to really make deer sounds. And I've heard a lot of deer making scrapes in my life, and it's a very distinct noise, and I just try to mimic that. It's just a whoosh, 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 when they're hoofing the ground, tearing up that scrape on the ground. And that's what I did. And just like I said, grunted a couple times, kind of soft. Nothing really happened for a couple minutes. And to be honest, I started getting impatient. I kind of started moving a little bit. Like if you're watching the video, if you ever watched a video, I'm starting to check the wind. Like I'm moving a little bit more than I probably should have, but luckily he just couldn't see anything either. Well, after a couple minutes, he started kind of huffing and puffing up in there and making a rub. You could hear him making some weird noises with his mouth, not necessarily grunting, but just going, and kind of coughing and rubbing, and you'd see a tree moving up there, and I'm like, well, it's a buck, assuming it's a decent one, and
mm-hmm.
it was getting, I mean, it was darker than what you would think for the time that it was. There was still, legal time left, like a good chunk of it, like probably 6-7 minutes. But the way that the sun was going down behind us, it just made it so hard to like look into that backlit stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that deer was right up there. He jumped down into the logging road, and he had his head down. And from my angle, I couldn't even see what the deer was. But I mean, assuming it's a buck, and he's grunting, and he's now on the logging road with us at 20 yards. But just the way that he jumped down, he got low, and from my angle, I just couldn't see. So he starts grunting, and he starts walking right at us. Like, well, I better draw my bow, I guess, because now he's like 17 yards in closing,
Yeah.
So I just calmly drew my bow back, anchored, and just kept watching this thing continue to walk right at us. Now, again, I literally have no idea what this deer is. I don't know if he's a 30-pointer or if he's a, big old buck.
Mm-hmm.
And keeps walking, gets to 3 yards away from me, from Ted, and he pops his head up, and I was like, oh, yep, shooter. And he was slightly quartering too, and I didn't feel confident at that moment. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do it in the right situation, but in that moment, I feel super confident in the quartering too, just because low light and there's a little bit of grass because I was staying low. And I couldn't tell exactly where I wanted to put that pin, but then he took a half step back and he gave me a straight on frontal shot, and I settled my pin, and at 3 yards, I shot him and
Which pin?
tore down the hill. What's that?
Which pin did you settle?
All of them.
That's what I'm thinking.
I really just did my best to like center and hold it and really just, follow through with it. And
yeah. So one of the first episodes we ever did was with Zach, actually. And despite bad phone service, we were able to kind of have some kind of a relationship together over the last few years. The thing is about having a good friend is that you get to brag when you shoot a big buck. And so off the air, I actually talked to Zach quite a bit about the Illinois buck that I shot recently. That is frankly a giant. And I've just been super blessed to have that happen. But, a big part of that story is the fact that we were able to have a route of travel to and from that scrape by using Exodus trail cameras. So we had a Lift 2 there that we put over that scrape this summer, and we were able to see that those deer were coming in a particular direction that I was able to set up to know that deer would be coming by me, giving me a broadside shot. So it was very effective for me. I was able to shoot a big buck, and you can go check out that on YouTube as well. We've got a video of it. So go check it out, and also check out ExodusOutdoorGear.com to see more of their trail camera lineup.
He ran down the hill and ended up hitting one lung liver, and it wasn't exactly the best shot that I've ever made. I'm not overly proud of it, but as far as the hunt and the situation, it was something that, that shot, I will say this, I guess. That shot is a shot I talk about often. And I think if you have the right arrow set up and, it's the right situation, it's one of those controversial things. I think that frontal shot on anything in the right situation is totally ethical. I just missed the mark just like you could at any old broadside shot too. Yeah. I just slightly missed, and we still got the buck. I just wish it would have been a little bit more efficient than that, because it's just not the ideal situation. But I shoot a super heavy arrow, single bevel broadhead, and I think that if you got a deer inside of, like, I always say about 16, 17 yards and in, if you've got a good pin on them, I think that shot's an okay shot to take, and it's a totally ethical shot. Now, at 30 yards, I'm not shooting a deer in the chest. It's not the way. There's just too many factors that can happen. But
yeah, that's duck distance right there for sure. That's when they're going to move.
Yep. And I'm not necessarily promoting it for everybody too. Like I said, it's just a situational thing, and for my arrow setup and my hunting off the ground too makes a huge difference. In a tree stand, it's a lot different of an angle, and it's a lot harder to that off. But anyway,
that's why we
shoot.
A
super fun hunt, man.
Yeah, for sure, dude. And it looked like a lot of fun. It's a cool state to go to. I think I remember you talking about Pennsylvania back in the day when we first met you. But that's the reason we shoot heavy arrows too, man. Those day 6 arrows. You want them to blow through some stuff when you get an opportunity. Now, do you think that that shot was easier or more difficult than your elk shot? Because you took a frontal on your elk too, right?
Yeah. I think that as far as getting a pin on him, it was obviously even easier.
Yeah, sure.
The tough thing was like we talked about it in the video too. It's, you don't practice for a 3-yard shot. I'll go up to 10, 12, 15 yards and shoot pretty often. I can hit a thumb back in there, but it's at 3 yards and just actually shooting at a live animal. It was pretty difficult, but the advantage that you have at 3 yards is the deer doesn't have any time to move. That was the fastest, fastest ever an arrow will probably ever hit a deer that I shot. It was like in him before I could even probably move my bow.
Yeah, it's like all the same noise, right?
Right. Yeah. It just didn't really make a typical arrow. It's like,
Yeah.
But then this difference between that elk is that the elk had time to move. So they were both unique. I think I'm yet to find that sweet spot of like a 12-yarder. Yeah. For that frontal shot, I think is kind of the sweet spot, because it's still the distance where they don't really have time to move, but it's also that distance still where you can burn a pin into a single hair or a single little spot on their, aim small, miss small, right? And I think at that distance, it's essentially the perfect opportunity. But like I said, you get 20 plus yards and it becomes more difficult just because the deer, whitetails are cagey. They're going to move. And even at 20 yards on a broadside shot, especially, you toss a tree stand angle in there, or maybe you're just above them on a hill or something. I mean, there's definitely a lot of chance for them to move, but, level ground, 16, 17 to about maybe 8 yards in it, that'd be kind of that window, I would say, of the perfect for quartering to or frontal shot, I would say, just where you can really pick your spot.
You hear us talk a lot about the effectiveness and the quality of Cobra releases all the time, but guys, quite honestly, there's a mantra, and the mantra goes, look good, feel good, hunt good. And let me tell you, there's something to it, okay? There's a reason why I like my camo to match, all right? Y'all might make fun of me, that's fine, whatever. I like it, okay? And I like my Cobra release because, man, it looks good. It's a professional quality product. You can tell that the leather is high quality, and everything they've got, man, they actually have different colors of leather, different varieties of stuff you can do. If you're real flashy, they got that Harvester release that's orange. I mean, come on, man, you can't beat it. So if you want something that looks good, that helps you hunt good and helps you kill, go check out CobraArchery.com.
Well, man, that's awesome. Congrats on the PA buck. I know, like KC said, you've been talking about Pennsylvania for a few years now, and it's really cool that you were able to shoot like pretty much a buck that I think most people would consider a good buck just anywhere in the country, I mean, a lot of times when you go out of state, you're like, you're thinking, well, I'm just kind of looking for a buck, but that's a heck of a deer, man, and congrats on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was, it's kind of a lifetime dream come true. I really have always been intrigued by big woods, Pennsylvania, hunting a lot of eastern Ohio and stuff when I was a kid. And then having buddies that lived in Pennsylvania. And, as time goes on, I meet more and more friends that live in Pennsylvania. And it's kind of that, just the hunting culture of Pennsylvania, and the big woods setting is just so cool and something that brings a unique challenge. And I was very excited to tackle it, and I'm excited to go back there someday in the future, and then, continue to explore the Northeast and East in general.
Sure.
The thing I'm thinking about now is I'm like, man, how do I get down in the Southeast?
Yeah. Bring bug spray and snake gators, man.
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we appreciate you hopping on the phone. I know you're busy, and this time of year is just going to get busier, but with the rut, man, coming up, good luck with everything. I know you guys are going to put some down, and we'll be watching, man.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to tell my story.
Sure, dude. Sure. All right. We'll see you
later.
Man, what an awesome story about a big buck. Guys, we want to say a big thanks to Exodus Trail Cameras and Cobra Archery for being a part of this big buck breakdown.
For sure, man. And also, if you want to check out what we do on a daily basis, maybe even see some of these big bucks, go to Instagram and follow us at The Element Wild. And then also subscribe on YouTube to keep up with what we're doing throughout the season. And subscribe on the podcast. And remember, this is your element.
Live in it.
I'll swim across and meet you on the other side. I'm not sure why we even have to fight. We grew up in the same situation. The river between us caused a lot of frustration. Brothers, let's forgive and forget.